Hello, and welcome to this week's My Story. This is episode 3, and this season is geared towards me talking about my story specifically. In this episode, we're going to be talking about gaslighting, psychological projecting, and elements of emotional and psychological abuse. And not only will I be explaining what these things are, but I'm going to use examples from my life as I share my story, because maybe it'll make it a little bit relatable and express to you what these things really are. I don't like boxes, and neither do I like labels, although I do see the importance of it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. My name is Andrea John. I am a mom, a wife, and a daughter of God. I have good times and I have bad times, just like everyone else. There was a time where my life was miserable. I was married to someone who many would call a narcissist for about 12 years, and I endured all types of abuse. I never really talked about this publicly in this type of setting, but the reason I'm talking about it now is because I've reached this point in my healing that to further the healing, I feel like I need to talk about it. And I also want to help other people who are in this situation, and maybe you're confused, maybe you're scared, maybe you don't even see it. But I want to call it out because I want you to know that there is hope and there is freedom. I endured a relationship filled with gaslighting and psychological projection without even knowing what those things were. In essence, in simple terms, I would call it emotional and psychological abuse. Last week, I talked about the sexual abuse I went through. And there was some physical abuse, although not a lot. I'm in that way very fortunate. I honestly believe that one of the reasons that he didn't touch me more than he did, he laid his hands on me a handful of times, was because I think he was afraid of what I would do to him. That is the only reason why. Because the psychological and emotional abuse were keeping me within his control in a much better fashion than if he would have physically abused me. The physical abuse awakened me to what was happening. So in order to stop that, he wouldn't touch me in that way. He would do it with psychological and emotional methods. One of the biggest impacts that the abuse had on me was gaslighting. I didn't know what it was. To be honest, I didn't even know about that term until maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I didn't know what it was. What I know is that there were times where I would find myself in complete desperation, crying on my knees in front of my ex-husband, begging him to admit me to a mental hospital because I was going crazy. These were always in the midst of some sort of argument that we were having. And I would tend to explode right before this stuff happened. I remember this one occasion because it was so emotionally gut-wrenching. I mean, I threw plates and cups and mugs and broke all sorts of things in the house out of my frustration, out of my confusion, because I knew that what he was saying wasn't right, but I had no way to prove it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But what would happen was the constant questioning of reality that was happening in those bursts of anger, because it was so outside of my character that when I would have those bursts of anger, I would go into this deep sense of lack of identity. My identity has now just gone out the window So I would just drop to the floor and beg him, please, I'm going crazy. And I would apologize to him even when I did nothing wrong, simply because I didn't know reality from, I didn't know what was real and not real. It's one of those cases where it's truly difficult to understand unless you've gone through it or unless you're going through it. I know what it's like. I know what it's like for people to look at you and say, don't you see it? But still not see it. And the reason is because you've been psychologically and emotionally conditioned. There's some people who bucket emotional and psychological abuse. And while there are elements of it that I could say as a person, so let me just say this, a disclaimer. I am not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist. I am, however, an informed individual who really researches, seeks out information, and looks to improve my quality of life. And I have learned a lot. And I know from personal experience that emotional abuse and psychological abuse are just as damaging as physical abuse and sexual abuse. And I can also tell you that I believe that emotional and psychological abuse are different. They can overlap at times, and psychological abuse results in emotional abuse, but it's really, really, to me, around what it's doing to our brain and to our being. So gaslighting. I didn't want to just like throw things out there without having something concrete. So that's why I took a couple days longer to do this podcast. But gaslighting, I'm going to read a definition, and there were subtle nuances around different definitions that I read. So I'm going to read the one that I think is easy for everyone to understand. It's gaslighting. It's a subtle form of emotional manipulation. And I actually believe it's psychological manipulation because you're making a person question reality. It's not just affecting emotions. You're causing someone to psychologically alter themselves. So it's a subtle form of psychological manipulation that often results in the recipient doubting their perception of reality and their sanity. There are some places, and I like this one, instead of a subtle form, it said an insidious or covert manipulation. Either way, gaslighting is manipulation. Okay, you are manipulating someone into believing, thinking, or experiencing something in some form of fashion in a way that opposes reality, to have them question reality. So I wanted to give some examples. And by me doing this podcast and me going through this healing time that I've been going through recently, it's funny how like when in prayer or even while I sleep and then I wake up and these things come to my memory that were buried in my subconscious, they were just like down deep. And I kind of forgot about them. It's not that I forgot them, it's that I forgot about them. And it's been several years, but also they were kind of traumatic moments that you don't want to think about, right? So I want to give you an example of gaslighting in my personal life. There was a time where I was traveling for work. And usually it would be for a week at a time. So I would be gone Monday and then come back Friday. And there was one particular occasion where I came back home, and that Saturday I went to go clean my room. And I had a desk in my room, and obviously there was a chair. And whenever I would be using clothes, maybe they weren't necessarily ready for the hamper or whatever, I may use them again, I would plop them on the chair. Well, I was going through the clothes on the chair to clean my room, and I found this woman's t-shirt, and I knew it wasn't mine. It was kind of nasty looking, And I don't know, it was just like, I still remember it because I remember like picking it up, like the t-shirt like this, like it was totally nasty and disgusting. And it wasn't mine. And I was like, and it was like, so I had, let's say, a couple pieces of clothes and then the t-shirt and then a couple pieces of clothes. So it's clear that the t-shirt was there for a while and I just didn't notice, or I can't explain it. What I know is that when I took the shirt to my ex and I asked him, whose shirt is this? Because no one has been in my house. Why is there someone's shirt, a female t-shirt, in my bedroom? And what proceeded after that was complete denial and how can I say, like, undermining my sanity, where it was, no, that's your t-shirt. And I knew it wasn't my t-shirt. And it was like, I'm trying to make sense of how the t-shirt got in the room. There's no other way. No one slept over. No one was there. Why is this t-shirt here? And the word I was looking for, he was minimizing what was happening, like really making it not a big deal so that I wouldn't freak out, right? So he didn't panic. He didn't get worried. He was just like lying on the couch, totally like, I don't know what happened, blah, 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 right? So, I mean, I was left in absolute confusion. Now, this was after years of going through psychological abuse. Okay, so this is on the tail end of things. And I've already been conditioned. Okay, I've found things, like I'm going to talk about one of them in a little bit, and I knew there was something going on. I just, was constantly in denial. There was always an excuse. So I took that t-shirt and I threw it away, and I never had answers. And like usual, I drop it. Because what are you going to do? How do you prove that that's not your t-shirt? You can't. And that's actually one of the signs of gaslighting. And I'm going to share two more stories that I experienced of gaslighting. And then I'm going to share with you some examples of gaslighting. Okay. But I do think sometimes people say things are gaslighting and it's not. And that's because nowadays gaslighting is just a term that's thrown around there, just like narcissism is. But I'm going to give you examples so that you have an idea. And I really just want to caution everyone when I do this. It's so hard for me because I really hate labels. And I think sometimes we label people wrongly. And I also think sometimes we put people in a label or in a box as if they can never get out. And I don't believe that. I believe that change is possible for anyone. Okay, so before I get into that, when I was moving from my apartment to our apartment to a house that was mine, so we were already separated. I was decidedly leaving. I decided the lease was up on the apartment, and I decided I'm going to go get a place of my own. So I did that. Well, in the midst of moving, I had a washer and dryer that I had been leasing, and the company came to pick it up. Now, just as the company came to pick it up, I was there when the company went to drop it off. And when we got this washer and dryer in the apartment, my ex was not around. He was still in where we used to live before North Carolina. Okay, so I was there in the drop off. I was there on the pickup. And when they removed the washer and dryer, to my shock and astonishment, there was a used condom underneath the dryer. And it was not mine. And we had never used a condom. So how did a used condom wind up under my washer in my apartment when I know that it's never been used? And guess what happened when I mentioned it to him? I have no idea how it got there. You're crazy for thinking it's mine. Blah, 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 right? So it's, it was like, I know it wasn't there before. Like, you have to understand that now, as a rational, logical person who recognizes the obvious signs of what really was going on, I have to put myself in the position I was back then. And I'm telling you that my reality was totally in question. I mean, I started to think about every possible reason why that thing was under my dryer, even though there was only one logical reason. Only one. But I was trying to make sense of it because reality, I didn't know what it was. In that same time frame where I would travel for work, I was, again, cleaning my room one weekend, and I come across a movie ticket receipt for 2 tickets to the movies late at night. And there were so the receipt was for 2 tickets on a night where I wasn't home. I was traveling for work. So I go to my daughters, who were very young at the time. I think one was maybe 6, like 5 to 6, 7, 8, around there. And I said, hey, did you guys go to the movies while I was gone? No. But they told me, but one night when he put us to sleep, he left with someone and he left us home alone. And he thought that they were sleeping, but they knew that he had left them home alone. Mind you, these are minors, okay? And I'm traveling for work, and I'm entrusting their father, who was my husband at the time, to watch them. But he left. So I asked him about the receipt. I didn't tell him that I knew what the girls had told me. I just asked him, hey, who did you go to the movies with? And he said, I didn't go to the movies. And I said, yes, you did, because there's a receipt. And he said, I have no idea where that receipt came from. And completely denying it. Again, just like the t-shirt. And the lies are so believable that, and it's happened so often that you start to wonder, did I go to the movies and forget about it? Did we go to the movies and I forgot about it? And again, there's no explanation, and just throw it out and you move on. But all these little things add to questioning reality, questioning your sanity, questioning your memory. So let me give you some examples of gaslighting. And these are very generic, okay? So a person who's gaslighting, they're going to deny what they've even said. And that happened to me. Some of the times where I begged him to take me to a mental hospital was because he would say something, and then when I would repeat what he said, like even verbatim, he would deny that he just said it. And talk about, and then wanting you to prove that. Okay, so they take it a step further where it's, you just said this. No, I didn't. Well, prove that I didn't, because I'm telling you I didn't just say it. And the first time it may rub you wrong. The second time you're like, after the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth time, you question reality. And at some point, you don't even realize it's happening anymore because it's become such a constant part of your life. They criticize what you love, causing you to question your identity. This happened to me in many different forms, and there's 2 main forms that I'm going to share with you. Again, examples from my personal life. 1, he tried almost our entire relationship, so pre-marriage, post-marriage, all the way through, to get me to question my parents' love for me and my brother. My parents are missionaries in Africa, and when my brother was a senior in high school, they went over there for 3 months or something. And then they came back, and then, once my brother was away and he was settled and my parents were ready, they actually went over to Mozambique to live for a while. After I had Anna, my mom actually came several months later to come back and help me with Anna. But the entire during they were in Africa, after, it was always trying to put these doubts, like, your parents love those people more than they love you. Your parents abandoned the family to go over there. They care more about those people than they care about you. And I always knew that that wasn't true. Obviously, like, that was one part that he could never convince me of. I think that it did affect my relationship with my parents negatively, because there was always this awkward thing between us, not coming from my parents, but coming because of him. Like, he put it there, so I was putting it there. And that was one thing. And obviously, if you question what you know about your own parents and their love for you or your acceptance or whatever, that's going to cause you to question your identity. Another thing that I love that he would cause and put into question and criticize was when I started running after I had my youngest daughter, Alicia. I got into marathon running and all this stuff, and that's, hours and hours of training. When we moved to Washington, I was part of a running group, and we would run every Saturday morning. And there were times where it was like quick, I'd be back in an hour, and there were times it would take several hours because I was running, 20 miles, let's say. But he always made me feel bad about running. Like, it's taking time from the family. I love running more than him. I love running more than the family, putting all of that into question all the time. And at some point, it caused me to go into a protective mode. And I actually used running as like a currency. So I would let him go out on Friday nights to go hang out with his friends, just so that he would be home in the morning to stay with the girls so that I could go running. And really, it was just a matter of me having an adult in the house so that the girls weren't home alone, because the girls were capable of, they would take care of him when I was away. But that aspect of criticizing what you love to question your identity, it's not that running is my identity, but it's something that I loved and it made me feel good and accomplished. It was something till today that when I run a race and I cross the finish line, no one can take credit for me. It's just hard work, determination, and grit. And it's an accomplishment that's mine alone. Even if I'm there by myself, it's just a huge accomplishment. And he would always criticize that. Another one is lying to your face so well that you become unsure of anything that they say. There was a woman pregnant with his baby in the world. And I so remember a vacation that we took as a family, like all of his family. And this woman was walking around pregnant with his baby, or had his baby. I think she was pregnant at the time. Obviously, I had to do the math on that one. But he would adamantly say, like, when somebody would say something, because, he was struggling with addiction and all that stuff. And he was in this place where he was trying to fix it. And, it was no secret that there was issues, but he would say with such conviction and such, like, it seemed like brutal passion, me, I would never cheat on it. You would have to be, he would use these words, you would have to be crazy to cheat on someone like Andrea. Who in the world would, and he would point at me and say, who would cheat on her? And it was so convincing that I honestly thought, even though my gut, now I realize my gut, everything told me he was cheating. I would even tell him, I wouldn't be surprised if a woman showed up at my door pregnant. Even though my gut knew it, he was so convincing in his lie that I was convinced that if he did cheat on me, I'd be able to tell. I really was convinced of it. I felt like he would be so guilty that he wouldn't be able to live with himself. And boy, was I wrong. Projecting is also an element of gaslighting, psychological projecting. So I'm going to just like pause on that because I want to touch on that too, on it in its own little category. Saying something different from what they do. So basically their words don't match their actions, but they claim that they do. Talk about messing with your perception of reality. And the last one I'm going to share, and there's like playing a victim. I have playing a victim here. There's so many, and you can like Google this and all that stuff. But getting angry when someone asks you a simple question. I lived in fear of asking a question. Even if it wasn't ill-intended, even if it wasn't like a bad question, I just needed to know something like, are you going to go here? Are you going to go there? Or whatever the case, like even if it was something work related, and them getting angry over the question, like you can't even ask them a question about anything related to their life, they get angry. Usually the reason for that is because they're hiding something, but it's a sign of gaslighting. And, the causes, now I want to share the causes of gaslighting. So I want you to remember that psychological projection is a part of gaslighting, but I'm going to highlight that a little bit different because I want to explain that because I went through that majorly. And that's a huge red flag for me anyway. So I want to point it out. But the causes, what gaslighting causes, and this is the ultimate, like, the person who's gaslighting you, their ultimate desire. This is what it is. 1, to make you doubt your memory. Because if you doubt your memory, if you doubt your perception of reality, you will never have the confidence to stand up for yourself, to stand up for what's right, to defend yourself. You're just going to be a punching bag. Because when you lose your memory, even think about older people go through Alzheimer's or dementia. When you lose your memory, you become very dependent, right? So this is one of the objectives. The other one is, I kind of just mentioned it, lack of self-confidence. They don't want you to have the confidence because they want to be able to manipulate, control. You're like Play-Doh in their hands, and they can kind of manipulate you however you want. And this is why, to me, gaslighting is so much more than emotional abuse. It's psychological abuse because what it's doing is it's using neuroplasticity against you. Because now instead of forming your brain, think about it like Play-Doh, instead of forming your brain into a healthy brain, they're forming your brain into an unhealthy brain. And instead of you doing it, they do it. They're in the driver's seat. It causes anxiety and sometimes depression. You're in a constant state of anxiety. And this affects not only you physically, but it affects your brain process, how you process things. You can't think clearly when you're anxious. You're not healthy when you're anxious. You can't be logical. It's like those are the objectives. And the last one I have here is their purpose is to get you to believe that you are highly sensitive and you overreact. And this is what happens when you ask just a basic question. They blow it way out of proportion. Yet they blame you for overreacting. They blame you for being too sensitive. They blame you when you share your emotions. They blame you when they're doing something wrong and you call them out. Okay, and that's a whole other thing, because psychological and emotional abuse is like a really big thing. These are just some small aspects that I'm sharing. And I'm sharing these because these are the ones that really got to me, and I've really had to work on undoing the damage, and that's what I'm doing. And by me being here and sharing this with you, that's what I'm doing. I am continuing to undo the damage caused by gaslighting and psychological projection. So there is a solution that I want to offer, because I don't want to just talk about the bad stuff. But before I get there, let me just touch on psychological projecting. Psychological projecting, what is that? I would describe it as, did I write something down? Hold on. Okay, so when an individual's own undesirable thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors, when they put that onto someone else. Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples, and then I'm going to give you an example from my life. So when a parent's demanding their children achieve something that they didn't. So basically, their children have to do what they couldn't do. They're projecting their desires, their failures, their successes on their children. And I think that if anyone's ever experienced this, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Thinking someone hates you, think like when someone thinks you hate them when you don't, they're always questioning, do you like me? Did I do something wrong? It can be a sign that they have an issue with you, but they're projecting their dislike of you onto you, and they're making it your problem. Hopefully that makes sense. So an example would be let's say someone comes home. This is not my example, but I'm going to give you this example. Someone came home, let's say a woman comes home. She had a really bad, because I don't want to make this like just a male predominant thing, because it's not. Okay, this is just a human, like it could be any type of human, male or female. Let's say a woman comes home from work. She had a really bad day of work. She had a presentation. She couldn't focus. She couldn't do it. And she comes home and she blames her husband and says, I had such a horrible day at work because you made me stay up at night. Okay? She's projecting her failures onto her husband, making it his fault. Okay? So it's not his failure. He didn't do anything wrong. It's her failure. But it's kind of like blaming, right? You're blaming someone for something that they didn't do. You did it. But it's like a mirror in a way. Or someone saying, I was late to work today because you made me go drop off the kids. I have a big issue with statements like you made me. And that's something that I've taught my girls a lot. When we have emotions and we're trying to express ourselves, no one can make you feel or do anything. If you feel or do something, you have chosen to. Now, you may have gotten a feeling from something that someone has done, but they can't make you feel that way. You've chosen to feel that way. You may have a right to feel that way. That way may be very understandable, but they didn't make you. It's a choice that you have. So now let me share with you an example from my life. And I kind of laugh now because in the moment, you just don't see it. And I really want to share this because I think so many people are suffering and they don't realize that what's happening is wrong. It's very, very wrong. So I'm going to talk about I'm going to do an episode simply on the experiences I had where I caught my ex interacting with a woman in a sexual way, and him making excuses for it. So I'm going to do one just on that. So I'm not going to get into that, but just know that happened, okay? So let me give you, before we go into that, another example of gaslighting, because I had written it down. I was like, he was going to go to his native country to visit his family for a holiday. And we couldn't go because we didn't have the money for that. But he got a bonus at work, so he was going to go. I had no say in the matter. But one day, he had left his Facebook logged into my computer. And a message came through from this woman that we had known from a church that we used to be at. And apparently she had moved to that country. And they were planning detailed plans of spending New Year's together on this cruise. There was no family in it. It was just the two of them. And they made all these plans. When I asked him about it, well, two things happened. So I'm going to share it all. When I asked him about it, he first denied that the conversation even happened. But I showed him. When he saw it, he grabbed me by the neck and threw me up against the wall. And I fell. I had this like futon and I fell. I mean, I had bruises. I actually have pictures of that one. So, and he got mad at me. He got angry at me for reading his message because it was none of my business. So even though he was talking to another woman, making plans in another country to spend a holiday with him and leave him and his two daughters home alone, that wasn't the problem. The problem was that I read his message. The sad thing is that this is all too common. And I know quite a few people, too many people for my liking, that this has happened to, where they will find something like this, not searching it, just they find it. But if they approach their spouse about it, their spouse gets angry with them for reading it or watching it or whatever. They get angry for getting caught. They don't get angry because they did something wrong. And you're not allowed to be angry for what they did wrong because you read the message. You shouldn't have read the message. That is psychological abuse to the max. Okay, so on top of the physical threat to make me afraid so I would never read something like that again, he turned it around, made it my fault because I read a message I shouldn't have read. Then he denied it and said that I wasn't understanding the conversation, that their words that I don't understand, and it's like a secret code or whatever, okay? I think it was after that I stopped touching his phone. But it wasn't long after that, and this is the story about projecting that I want to go into, so it actually does kind of tie together. It wasn't long after that, because we were still living in this place, and we only lived in this place for 2 years. And it was definitely after that, where, well, a lot happened there. Wow, something just came to mind. Where an old boyfriend of mine, he was my first boyfriend, so I was a teenager at the time, I was 14, 15, messaged me on Facebook. And we were chatting, okay, having normal conversation. I mean, I'm married with kids living across the country, and, we're kind of like reminiscing. Well, my ex had my phone in his hand, which was common. I never have anything to hide. Here, take my phone. You need to use it. He was watching something, or I don't know exactly why he had it, but he did. And the ex messaged me on Messenger, and I don't remember what it was about, but I remember. Even my mom remembers, she didn't even live there because she got a phone call. I remember him getting up off the couch, getting so upset, yelling at me for cheating and all this stuff. And I'm crying because he's not believing me. He grabs a suitcase, tells me to leave. This is after, I can't even count on 2 hands how many times I caught him having indecent conversations with other women. I had caught him on a dating website. I like all this stuff, okay? And this message happens, and I'm kicked out of my house, and I have to go sleep in a hotel without my daughters. And I don't know what's gonna happen. He's extremely angry. I've done absolutely nothing wrong, but I've done something horrible enough to be kicked out of my house when I had never kicked him out of my house. And I I got to the hotel and they could tell I had been crying. It was just this big, long story. And thankfully, his parents came in. They were traveling to visit us, and they came in the very next day. Praise the Lord Jesus that this happened, because when he told his parents what happened, they went against him and said, she did not do anything wrong. She cannot control what somebody writes to her. Did she respond? Did she react? No. And it was the voice of reason. And thankfully that blew over. But I don't even want to know what would have happened if his parents hadn't visited us that very next day. That, my friends, is projection, because he was cheating on me for years and years, but he was always paranoid that I would cheat on him. And any indication, I had a friend of mine that was just a friend and lived across the country, yet he was so adamant about this person. And it was one of the only friends I had growing up, like from that time, and, lifelong type of friend. And oh my gosh, it was agonizing. Like, I remember okay, let me tell you this one, and then I'm going to end it for today. We were traveling. Yes, because he was away, got back from work. We went away to the beach for the weekend. And I woke up early and I went for a run on the beach, and I posted a selfie on Facebook. And this person was the first person to like my picture. And I get back to the hotel, and what ensues is a huge accusation based on one like. Okay, that one like on Facebook became, you're cheating, you're this, you're that, blah, blah, blah. It was just horrible, okay? Ruined the whole weekend, okay? You feel guilty. You're like, I can't be friends with this person anymore. Look at what's happening. You're not understanding what's happening because your brain's not there. Like, I just don't think about you. My brain was not there. And what's interesting is that when I found out about the woman with the baby, that very weekend where he got upset about that one like on the picture, that woman was pregnant and he knew it. Talk about projection, guys. When someone accuses you of something, like I even have, acquaintances or people that I meet through ministry, and, when they attack me about something that's so far from the truth, in your heart, when you know something is so far from the truth, when they accuse me of that thing, I can't help but wonder if they're just projecting. And it tells me a lot about them when they accuse me of something that's so far from the truth, like so far from the truth. And it's one of the reasons why I've learned not to defend myself, because defending yourself does you no good. And maybe I'll do a podcast about that at some point. But so we're here at the end of the podcast. Okay. So we've talked about gaslighting. We've talked about psychological projecting, which is a form of gaslighting. And they are part of psychological abuse. I would say a large part of psychological abuse, because it's really around manipulation. And it's scary and it's hard, right? But what if you're going through this right now and you're like, what is the answer? Because I don't see it. And I understand that. I was in such a dark place. I couldn't see straight. I couldn't think straight. I wanted to go to a mental hospital because the sky looked yellow, but everybody was saying, the sky was blue, but he kept saying it was yellow, type of thing, right? And it's kind of like, well, what's reality? You need to limit or stop your contact with someone who's doing this to you. And if you're married, so if you have a friend who's doing this to you, I don't care if you were born at the same time in the same hospital, okay? I don't care how long you've been friends with them or what you've gone through together or what horrible thing or how much they've supported you in the past. They're not healthy. And you must limit or completely stop. I would encourage, if you can, you stop all contact with this person because you're never going to be able to see clearly until you do. I'm not saying that this end of contact is permanent, but you must become dedicated to take some time away and apart so that you can think clearly. Because while you're under the manipulation, I don't care how strong you think you are, how much you think you know, or how many friends you think you have. When you're under that household of manipulation or around that all the time, having conversations like that, you will never be able to think clearly. I don't care how mentally strong you are or you think you are. You will never be able to think clearly when you're under that type of manipulation. There are going to be times that you cannot completely stop the contact. When you can't stop the contact completely for whatever reason, I'm not going to get into all the reasons now, you're going to have to alter your form of communication. You're going to have to set boundaries. You're going to have to stick to those boundaries, and you get to dictate communication. And you need to stick with that, and you need to honor it. And you should be able to be okay if you have to have some sort of communication. But it's really rare where you're being forced to have communication with someone. So you really have to assess, do I really need to, or am I choosing to? Because everything comes down to a choice. So if you or someone you know is experiencing gaslighting, especially within the context of a marriage relationship, you're going to need to step away. You have to. You're never going to get out if you don't. And the only way for you to assess what's the reality and what's not is for you to step away. Again, I'm not saying it's permanent. And it's possible to have forgiveness, reconciliation, and restoration. I've seen it happen with people. I have that hope. I really do. It may not have happened with me, but I believe it can happen. But you have to step away for a while for your own sanity. You cannot love someone else properly if you're not in a healthy place, if you're not loving yourself. It's not love, it's dependency, it's addiction, it's all sorts of things. So I'm going to end the podcast here. I'm so glad that I limited to it because I was going to talk about psychological abuse as a whole and some other things. And I had decided to just keep it to gaslighting and psychological projection because I felt like that was like a big chunk. And I wanted to really explain it, give you some examples, share about stuff from my own life. Again, it's to share with you, but also for me to go through my healing. Because a lot of these things that I didn't know if they were real, like that illusion of reality, is my perception correct or not? By sharing these things with you, it's allowing me to admit this was reality. I was not crazy. I was made to believe I was. I was made to believe that I was highly sensitive and overreacting, that my memory was faulty, but it really wasn't. And what that does is it gives me a sense of autonomy and self-regulation where I could take control back. And in little ways, that's what I'm doing through this season of my story with the Authentic Faith podcast. And I really hope that it helps you. I hope that it encourages you. I hope it empowers you above all to step into your true identity made in the image and likeness of God, to have the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, long-suffering, self-control, to remember that you are not a victim, but you are a victor. You are more than a conqueror through Jesus Christ, and you are never subject to someone else. Only Him should you surrender to. So I hope this blesses you. If you need a hand, if you need help, if you need like a reality checker, whatever, you're always more than welcome to reach out. If I can't help you, I'll send you in the direction of someone who can. And that's it for this week. So let me know what you think. Share it if it's blessed you. If you're on my YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the podcast. Also, check out all the playlists because there's some awesome content on the YouTube channel, if I say so myself. If you're on this podcast, make sure to follow the podcast on any of the podcast apps so you can stay up to date. And don't forget to share it. If this has blessed you, allow it to bless those around you. And I'm completely accessible to you. So if you need to reach out, feel welcome to do so. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or you can email me at hello@andreajohn.com. Thank you so much, guys, and I'll see you next week.